Hi guys, and welcome to another video by Mentome's YouTube channel. My name is Alan Arvindan. I'm a CFA charter holder, and today we'll be discussing on the global investment performance standards, right? So what is global investment performance standards? So we will divide this discussion across three major parts. First is understanding what is GIPS at an overall level. Then we understand the main guidelines which make it very important, and the reason why a lot of AMCs across, or the asset management companies, are actually adopting it. And finally, we look at the adoption state and also some certifications which have been developed so that people who want to work in performance presentation can actually do this certification, right? So first, let's understand at the very basic level what is GIPS, right? So GIPS was started by the CFA Institute itself, and it was drafted in order to get some standard of performance presentation across asset managements, companies who are actually managing public money. At the same time, also it applies to pension funds who are the asset owners, right? So at the present state, there are about 1700 organizations across 46 markets claiming compliance with GIPS, right? So you can actually claim GIPS compliance voluntarily. So there is no hard and fast rule that you have to be GIPS compliant, but it's just basically a voluntary arrangement where you can set your performance standards according to GIPS, maintain it for 5 years, and then claim compliance with the GIPS standards, right? So what is the main idea behind GIPS compliance is the fact that you are able to compare, like to like. So for example, if you are comparing apple to oranges, then it really doesn't make any sense, right? So what actually has to be done is that you compare apple to apple and oranges to oranges, right? So let us give you an example out here. So this is an HDFC overnight fund, right? Now this is just for explanation purposes. I'm not really claiming that HDFC is not performing their returns properly. It's just an example, right? So for example, here you can see that returns of less than 1 year period are simply analyzed, right? Annualized basically means that if, let's say, I've generated 2% performance in a given month, then all I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply that or compound that 1 plus 2% raised to 12 minus 1. So I'm going to show what this performance of 2% would look like at an annual level, right? Which is obviously not allowed according to GIPS, because returns for a period of less than 1 year must not be analyzed, right? But this is an exception, because in overnight fund in India, it is actually allowed to be simply annualized, and the same rule also applies with GIPS, right? So let's understand the fundamentals of the global investment performance standards, right? So first is standardizing the investment performance. Think about it like IFRS, right? The whole objective of getting a standardized accounting system across the world is so that if you are reading an annual report which is presented in the US versus somebody who's presenting it in India, there will be no difficulties in you understanding how the performance has been presented in the annual report. So similar structure is even for GIPS, right? Second is it gives you a global passport, because a fund based out of US can present their performance in India, and the person or the investor who is looking at the performance can be rest assured that the performance is standard, and there is no certain due diligence that has to be done to make sure that the calculation actually is similar to what it should be, right? And third is obviously the investment confidence in the investor confidence, because as soon as a firm is saying that it is GIPS compliant, we're rest assured that the globally most best practices have been followed in the performance standards, right? And that's where recently the State Bank of India asset management company actually claimed compliance to GIPS, right? Now, so whenever we are saying standardized investment performance, that means there's a fixed method of calculation. I will come to some examples in the future slide, which will make it clear what do I mean by fixed methods. Multi-country publishing, as I already spoke about, and trust building, which happens through GIPS, right? Now let's look at the fundamentals of compliance. I'm going to look at some of the standards I'm going to present to you so that it is much understandable on what we understand by GIPS, right? So first and foremost rule about GIPS is that a firm-wide basis compliance has to be taken. So you cannot start an asset management company and say that I'm GIPS compliant with this strategy and I'm not GIPS compliant with the other strategy. It has to be done at a company level, right? At a asset management company level. Second is that firm has to be a distinct business entity, right? So it cannot be a sub. So let's say SBI AMC also has a subsidiary under it. So that subsidiary is taking GIPS compliance while the parent company is not taking. That doesn't work. So it has to be done for a distinct business entity. And the most important part about this is that it has to be claimed for a minimum of 5 years, right? That means without 5 years or since inception performance, you cannot claim compliance to GIPS, right? Now let's look at some calculation performance examples which are very important, right? So if you see the slides, it is written in case of asset owners, the calculation of time weighted returns is much more preferred than the money weighted return. So I'll give you an example out here. So if you see the infographic in your screen out here, you can see on the left hand side we've got a portfolio about $100,000, and we've got a 75% performance coming in sub period 1, then 43%, then 60%, right? But the important thing to see is that in the contribution and withdrawal column, there is no withdrawal or contribution happening. So there is no cash flows which are coming in which is not under their control, and hence the time weighted rate of return is about 50%. And we look at the money weighted return on the right hand side, which is basically an IRR calculation. Also the returns is 50%. So when there is no contribution of withdrawal or there is no movement of cash flows which is happening, the time weighted return and the money weighted return basically gives you the same returns. But when you look at the contributions actually coming in, so when you see in case of the first example on the left hand side, 900,000 has been contributed. And at the same time, if you look at money weighted return, when 900,000 was contributed in 6/1/2017 and 800,000 was removed in 2018 of January, now you see that the money weighted return, which is basically the IRR calculation, shows a negative 30% return, right? Whereas time weighted return shows a 146. So that's where, so if an asset manager does not have control over the contribution and withdrawals, then it is recommended that the mutual funds or the asset owners should be using the time weighted rate of returns, right, and not the money weight. But in India, actually we use the XIRR calculation, which is nothing but the money weighted return calculation, right? So that's a short video on what is GIPS, and there is a certification also which is given by the CFA institution, which is also called as CIPM. It's a level based program. It takes about 2 years to complete, right, and about 400 hours of effort, right? So I hope you enjoyed this video on the global investment performance standards. So if you like the video, please do share it with your friends so that this video can be helpful for you and others. And do subscribe to our channel and stay updated, and we'll come with another video next week.